Now, a word that is quite simply music to the ears of us Pokemon fans is the word reprints. Now, I think it's been fairly unanimous that the solution to the current issue in the Pokemon TCG is the fact that everything needs printing, and heavily. Now, although that may be fairly unanimous, I think what will divide opinion more is what the effect will be of these reprints. Will it really solve the issue in the Pokemon TCG? So starting off strong, and we're going to start with the oldest set and work our way through in chronological order until we get to Surging Sparks, as that's the most recent set we've got that will be seen in reprint. Now, Paldea Evolved, as we know, I think the community can pretty much agree that it's one of the strongest sets from the entire Scarlet and Violet era. So I'm happy, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are as well, that it will be seeing a reprint. Now, how much of it will be reprinted, I don't know. Whether we'll see a flat kind of equal amount reprinted for all of the sets, or if they'll prioritize some more than others, we'll have to wait and see. But that's heavily dependent on what the price will be of the booster box. Now, currently sits at $222, which is very expensive for a booster box, right? Now, I've got the month chart up in front of me, and as we can see, it was on an upward trend, was around 190 in the middle of February, did rise and rise and rise, and hit 230 towards the end of February. And due to the news of the reprint, it's helped it to kind of plateau out a bit. As you can see, it's settled around that 220 mark where it's been for a week or two now. What price will this be once we see products hit the market? That's a very good question. It's one that we can't really answer for sure, but yes, we can make predictions. As I said before, it depends on how much product we'll see being reprinted. But I do think it's more than probable that we see this trickle below $200. It's plateaued out now. And once we actually see product become available, I do think we could see this trickle down towards 180, 190 US dollars, which really would be fantastic. No, I don't think we'll see MSRP prices because of how strong Paldea Evolved is, and because of how much demand there is in the community. I just don't see us seeing MSRP again for Paldea Evolved, unless you're one of the lucky ones that can kind of pick it up from the Pokemon Center website, or if you're lucky enough to have a local game store that does make this available for MSRP, that's fantastic. But I just don't think in general on the secondary market we'll see this hit MSRP again. Now, jumping onto the chase card of the set, we have the Magikarp, the infamous illustration rare, the most expensive illustration rare from the entire era. Now, this is interesting because this card really has started to move. Now, it says $200 here for the market price, as you can see from the chart, but this in fact was almost $300 only a few days ago. I made a video comparing different prices, and I showed that how the Magikarp illustration rare was pretty much the same price as the Charizard EX, the chase card from 151, as they were both around that 280, 290 US dollar mark. And as you can see here, when I pull up the recent sales, you can see that only about a week or so ago, we got 284, 289, 265 there. You can see that 279 there, 289. There were quite a few sales towards that upper part of $200, almost reaching $300. So the fact that this has dropped off nearly $100 already is massive, and it's a good thing, right? Because this Magikarp, for me, a $300 illustration rare, despite it being Shinji Kanda, despite it being a fantastic looking card, was just very, very expensive. It's very off-putting for your average collector, your average fan, right? So the fact that this card has dropped off from almost $300 all the way down to $200, and I think we could see it continue in that same vein, especially once we see product hit the market, is just very, very good news for the TCG. So moving on to the next oldest set, we have Obsidian Flames. Now, this is the one that really surprises me that it's being reprinted. Now, as we can see, it currently sits at around 198 US dollars, and it's about 2 years old, or it's coming up to 2 years old, therefore it's not long before it goes out of rotation as well. And on top of that, from a collector's point of view, it's not the most desirable set. Although I'm a big fan of it, I love some of those illustration rare cards. I've spoken about it in numerous videos, and I think I probably have more love towards this set than the average person in the community. It still does surprise me that it's being reprinted. For example, when we compare it to Stellar Crown right here, which is a lot newer, it came out in September 2024, so only a few months ago, this is pretty much the same price. Now, although you could say they could have printed older sets such as Temporal Forces or Paradox Rift, they're two sets that have had product available on the Pokemon Center website until very, very recently. It's only recently that those booster boxes have gone out of stock, right? But Stellar Crown went out of stock very, very quickly, and the fact it's only come out in September 2024 and is already about $200 US dollars is crazy. A booster box in only about 6 months time should not be reaching $200 US dollars. Normally in the average market is still below MSRP, at least on the secondary market. Therefore, the fact that Stellar Crown is this price and is not being reprinted, but Obsidian Flames is quite interesting. So here we have the chase card from Obsidian Flames, which of course is the Charizard EX. Now, Charizard, as we know, one of the favoured Pokemon from the entire franchise, but right now, I feel that Charizard just isn't the in Pokemon, so to speak. I think it's more Eevee and Umbreon going down that route, and even Mew to some extent. Charizard at the minute is just not his moment, which is why I think here we can see it $63, which for a chase card of a set being Charizard as well is very cheap. Now, when you look at, of course, the information, the facts, it's Obsidian Flames, which isn't the strongest set. And yes, this Charizard card isn't the most amazing Charizard we've got ever. It's not like the Charizard from 151, for example. It's still a respectable and decent card. So I think $63 for a Charizard chase card is very cheap in the grand scheme of things. So to see this card that could potentially even drop off more if we get more Obsidian Flames reprints, which we know we will, it could even drop to around $50, which would be extremely cheap for a Charizard EX Special Illustration Rare card. So what I could think happen is, although it could drop off, I think there'll come a moment in the next year or so when people wake up and realize this Charizard's really cheap, right? I mean, if it gets to $50, that's 6 times cheaper than the Charizard from 151, which is a lot, right? It's a lot. So I think there'll come a day when, although this could drop off due to the reprints, people will wake up and realize that how cheap it is for a Charizard chase card. And I think it could become a lot more expensive than what it is right now. Just a quick shout out and thank you to all of you that continue to support myself and the channel, and a huge welcome to all of the new subscribers here. Guys, if you're not yet subscribed, I love to talk about the Pokemon TCG, so if this sounds like something you would enjoy, please feel free to hit that subscribe button as I put out a new video every other day. And of course, to all of you guys, as per usual, if you are enjoying the video, please leave a like, as it really does help me out. So moving on to the next set in order, we have Paldean Fates. Now, for those of you asking, Will, why are we looking at a booster bundle and not a booster box? Well, that's because this was a holiday set, therefore there was no booster box. Similar circumstance to Crown Zenith, or even the specialty sets such as the 151 or Prismatic Evolutions. There simply aren't any booster boxes. So the best product we have to go by that will be getting the reprint will be this booster bundle here. Now, as we can see, currently sits at $60. So for a booster bundle that retails at around $25 to be $60 only a year after release, again, is very expensive. It's around 2.5 times MSRP. So if we compare that to, say, a booster box, for example, Obsidian Flames booster box retails for $160 US. So to give you an idea of how much that's risen as a percentage, that's like this being some quick maths, around $400 US, right? So for this booster bundle to be 60 right now, 2.5 times what it is retailing for at MSRP, is quite absurd, right? Especially only after a year after release. So another set that really did need a reprint, and one that's headlined by a fantastic card. That card, of course, being the Mew EX here, the famous Bubble Mew as it's often referred to, which, as we know, really took off towards the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. As we can see here from the graph, was around $260 odd towards the end of 2024, and then in the final days of December moving into January, it starts to fly, going all the way up to around $414, $415 US around the latter part of January to the beginning part of February. So a very high price, one of the highest prices of a single card for the entire Scarlet and Violet era. And you could say it's deserving of that because it is a very beautiful card. Mew, of course, being a very favoured Pokemon in the community, is probably deserved of that price. But as we can see, since it reached that high price in the latter part of January and beginning of February, it has trickled off a little bit, as you see, all the way down to around $360 US, which is where it is right now. Now, this is interesting because if we pull up the month graph, we'll see that it started to trickle down before the news of the reprints. Actually, if I move back to the 3-month graph, you'll see it started to decline around the beginning to middle of February, which is just before we got the news of the reprints. So when we did get the news of the reprints around a week or two ago, it was already in decline and has continued to do so in the same vein. So what will happen with reprints? I think this will continue to move in the same vein. I think right now it continued to decline and decline. What price will this Mew card reach with the reprints coming? Again, it depends on how much we get, but I wouldn't be surprised if we even see it reach all the way down to $300 US, which sounds cheap. I say cheap. $300 US for a single piece of cardboard is a lot of money, of course. But when you look at this Mew card, once being $416 US at one point, all the way down to 300 is not something you'd perhaps expect. Therefore, it's a good thing for the community and therefore opens the door for collectors to potentially pick this up, as it's over $100 cheaper than what it once was. Now, moving on to our penultimate set, we have Twilight Masquerade. Here we have the booster box, which, yes, although it's less than a year old, has reached the astronomical price of $224. Now, $224 for a booster box that isn't even a year old is crazy, right? No booster box should be this price. And if you think that's bad, just wait till we get onto the next set, because it gets worse. But Twilight Masquerade, considering the price, considering that it's a good set as well, of course, headlined by that infamous Greninja SIR card, which we'll get onto in a second. It's also got your Chansey in there, it's got your Infernape, your Pinsir, your Sunflora, your Eevee, of course, and your Carmine. It's a very, very, very strong set. I think as a community, we can agree on that. And the fact that it's that price, the fact of how good of a set it is, and it's still very new, I'm very happy that this set is getting reprinted, and I also think it's very, very needed. So what price will this reach with the reprints? That's a very good question, and as I've said previously, it does depend on how much product we get reprinted. But I do think as it sits here around 224, which is very similar price to this Paldea Evolved, which is 222. And I did say with Paldea Evolved that it will trickle down, or at least could trickle down to around 180, 190, at least below that 200 mark. I think it's more than possible that Twilight does the same thing. As Paldea Evolved, in my opinion, I think a lot of people agree, is a slightly more desirable set than Twilight Masquerade. If Paldea is going to trickle down to 180, 190, it's more than probable that Twilight Masquerade does also. So I do think with the fact that there's other more desirable sets being reprinted, such as Surging Sparks and Paldea Evolved, as well as other sets that look better than Twilight, such as Destined rivals to come out, I do think with them kind of hogging the attention, I do think this with reprints could easily trickle down quite a bit to around 170, 180 US dollars. Moving on to the big boy, the chase of the set, the Greninja EX SIR card, of course. Now this one reached a high of 411 US dollars, which is astronomical, right? And I think it deserves it. I'm a huge fan of this card. I think the colors are absolutely brilliant. It's a very, very, very attractive card. So I do think it's deserving of the price that it reached. But as we can see again with the reprints starting to trickle off, similar to that Mew card that we looked at here, this one a bit further along in its development of its decline. But as we can see with the Greninja, it's almost in the first few days of that decline. Sort of trickled off below 400s, currently sitting at around 395. What price could this get to with a reprint? Very good question. I think it could reach between 300 and 350. It's very hard to say because I don't know how much it's going to be reprinted and I don't know how the community will react. But of course, I do like making predictions and I know people like to hear predictions as well. So I do think between 300 to 350 is where we could see this card hit with the reprints. Moving on to our final set, which is Surging Sparks. And I think it's fairly unanimous. And I think we can all say this set definitely needed a reprint. So it's fantastic news that it is getting one. $260 US for a set that was released only a few months ago is absolutely absurd. It really does, in a nutshell, define and depict just the type of market we're in right now. Unfortunately, $260 is crazy. So it's a fantastic thing that this is getting reprinted, but how much effect will the reprints have? Of course, as always, I've said it depends on how much we get. And if they're going to kind of evenly distribute their reprints across the sets, or if they're going to prioritize certain sets, which I hope they do, because I think of all the sets being reprinted, it's without a doubt this set needs it more than any other. I think they'd be pretty kind of naive to print just as much Obsidian Flames as they do Surging Sparks, for example. I think this should be printed 5-10 times more than they do Obsidian Flames, but we'll wait and see what happens. What price do I think this set could drop down to, at least the booster box? I don't see it dropping below 200. I see it potentially sitting around 200 to 220 with a reprint. I do think product will get swallowed up pretty quick because there was a lot of people that were never able to get their hands on Surging Sparks. Of course, the market started to crazy just before or just around the release of Surging Sparks. So product was swallowed up very, very quickly. So there's a lot of people that were never able to experience any Surging Sparks product. So I do think this one will be swallowed up very quickly. Therefore, I don't see much of a decline in price. I think best case scenario, we're looking at, as I said, 200 to 220 US dollars. So of course the chase card from Surging Sparks is the Pikachu EX. This SIR card right here currently sits at 451 US dollars, which isn't the highest price it was at. As we can see here, it was almost 500 in the latter part of January. Now, as is typical with new cards, especially the chase cards, they start really high and they drop off and they fluctuate until they find the right value, which it's still kind of in the process of doing, given it's a very new card. Now, with reprints coming, yes, I do expect this one to drop off, but again, not a great deal. It's a hard card to pull. It really isn't easy. And with Surgeon Sparks products, most likely going to be swallowed up very quickly. Of course, it depends on how much they do reprint, but I do think we'll see this card maybe drop, best case scenario, to around 400. I don't know if it will go much lower than that. But when you compare it to, for example, this Greninja, which is around 400 now, the Mew, which is not far off 400 either, I do think Pikachu being probably the strongest Pokemon of those three, being the poster boy of the franchise, very beautiful card as well. I really couldn't see it dropping any more than 400 despite the reprints. Now, I've looked at the 5 sets that will be being printed again, and also the effects that I believe it could have on the sets, the product, and the chase cards from those sets. Now, I don't want to be too negative because yes, reprints in general is a fantastic plus, a big positive for the community, for us all. I do think perhaps it could have been done slightly better. For example, Obsidian Flames being a set that isn't the most desirable set, it's not the best of the era by any means, and of course it's quite old. Instead of using that printing power for Obsidian Flames, why not focus that printing power being used there on sets that need it more? For example, Surging Sparks. We're looking at a set that's only just come out in November, quite a new set, on the track to $300 US for a booster box, which is astronomical. It's absurd, right? Instead of them focusing on such a variety of sets with these reprints, why not nail it down and focus on only say 2 or 3 sets to really kind of bring down the prices of some of those booster boxes, right? And also the cards within them, because of course, as we know, there's a direct correlation between the prices of sealed products and the cards within them. So I do think, and I'm not going to complain too much because I'm a fan of the fact that we are getting reprints, I do think that it could have been done slightly better by, instead of focusing on some sets that don't need it that much, like Obsidian Flames, focusing that printing power on sets that do more so, such as Surging Sparks. So what effect in general will this have on the market? Well, I want to preface first by saying, of course, it's subjective depending on the amount of product we get reprinted, but I do think short term it's going to have a very, very little effect. Now, of course, I went through each product in each card and said what the best sort of case scenario would be, what the prices could potentially fall to. I do think in general, we're not going to see huge declines like you may think when you hear the word reprints. I do think in general, with the amount of demand there is in the hobby right now, that most product will be swallowed up quite quickly, unfortunately, therefore not having the greatest impact on prices. But of course, it depends on how much product we get reprinted. Now, with this being said, what it does do is sets us up nicely for the future. Why is that? Well, as we know right now, we're in a crazy kind of bull run of a market, and therefore there's so much demand. Whether you just be a simple fan, simple collector, or a scalper or an investor or whatever, there's demand there from all different parties. So product is going and getting consumed and swallowed up very quickly, but markets change, markets come and go, and there will be a time when product isn't as desired and isn't as demanded as it is right now. And the fact of the matter is, we are still getting more prints, right? We're getting reprints of a lot of sets, a lot of products. Therefore, there will be a time when the demand decreases a lot and this product will be here. So therefore, it sets us up nicely for the future, for when demand is lower and we want product at a decent price, it will then be available. Anyway, guys, that does conclude things for today. So it's been fun to go through the sealed products and the chase card of each of the sets being reprinted, give my kind of 2 cents on the situation where I think prices could be, as well as give my overall idea on what will happen thanks to the reprints. If you have enjoyed the video, guys, please don't hesitate to leave a like, as that would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to watch a couple of other videos of mine, you can watch this one right here where I talk about some of the safest cards to buy in this crazy market, or this card right here where I feature the new Destined Rivals set and the entire reveal of the Heatwave Arena set. So that's been everything from me today, guys. My name's Will, I've been Pokecharler, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.